Welcome back guys to Voicey here and another r/EntitledParents. Don't forget Voicey veterans to like, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss an episode. This story was called Entitled Mother Demands Children Removed from Public Playground because she's uncomfortable they might stare at her disabled daughter. I can't remember how old I was, but it was between 7 and 9. We had gone on a school trip to this camping resort. We'd slept in tents, then we could go to the big playground. That was public and open to any guests on the site, as well as a pool with the same rules and some stores. Me and some other classmates would hang out at the playground because they had swings, climbing towers and a bouncy castle. Just less castle, more a bouncy platform. Still fun though. There were other kids but we didn't pay them much mind. If they came over and asked to play, we always said sure. Now one kid shows up who is our entitled kid. She has a genetic disorder. That is the correct term I checked, called Down syndrome. This is important for what happens next. EK would continuously harass me, my classmates, and those who were playing with us. We were at the climbing tower and she came up demanding we'd leave because it was hers. At first we said it was a public playground, but she began throwing some of the outdoor toys at us. We decided fine, we'll go somewhere else and play, until she'd get bored and leave. We went to the bouncing platform. And she once again came up and same thing. This went on for a while. Apparently what she meant to say was we had to leave the playground, not just what we wanted to play on. Even when we split up to do different things, she'd just come after us one at a time. She went away for a little bit and we thought she got bored and went back to wherever she was camping. Eventually we were called to dinner. We were making burgers. And after that we were allowed to do whatever until bedtime, but could only visit the pool if escorted by an adult. It was safe not to supervise us all the time because the place had security. I and some others went back to the playground and we ran around doing the usual. Now guess who showed up? Entitled kid. And I've delayed enough so here she is. The entitled mother. Seemed to be in her mid-20s, blonde, curly hair, dressed, kinda skimpy if I remember correctly, and extremely heavy makeup. She had a boyfriend who'd I'd mistake for a junkie or alcoholic in present day. Right before the final confrontation, EK ran over to us again and demanded we leave. One had told the teacher who lectured him not to give into a bully's demands, and she kept it up to get security. He told her it was a public playground and when that didn't register, he shouted at her to go away. The mum's ignoring us and drinking with her boyfriend. I'm assuming she believed her baby could handle us just fine. EK got mad and began screaming at us to leave her playground. We said no again, so she ran up and shoved me. I got mad and shoved her back and that's when EM finally decided we had to be dealt with.
How dare you bully my daughter?
We weren't bullying her.
She just asked nicely to play with you and you keep ignoring her.
She keeps telling us to leave the playground. She's the one bullying us.
How dare you? My little sweetie is disabled. Why can't you show some respect and just leave?
Yes, she went from, she's just asking you to play with her to, she's telling you to leave so why don't you? This is a public park. We're allowed to be here. Our teacher told him to say this if we got harassed again, I think.
Well, I don't feel comfortable with you kids here with my daughter, especially after she,
me,
attacked her for no reason.
Not proud of it, but I was kind of just hiding behind all of them. I didn't know at the time, but I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, mild form of autism, at age 4, and I get frightened when people yell at me. She shoved her first. At this point, entitled mother has enough, and she and her boyfriend decide to remove us by force. Yes, that freaking happened. She managed to grab 2 kids, including the one driving the conversation, before someone walked up to us and asked what the heck was going on. She claimed she was just disciplining her kids, I assume as to not look like a potential kidnapper. Didn't entirely work though because the person walking up was our teacher, and he was ticked. He began to berate her, and her boyfriend who was still trying to grab me, calling them perverts, kidnappers, and threatening to call the cops. Then finally someone from security showed up, about time, hadn't seen them all day, and asked what was going on. We tried explaining, she tried to remove us because she thought her daughter owned the playground.
I just want them to leave the playground so my daughter could play safely and not risk being bullied.
She motions to EK who never stopped wailing after I shoved her. Is this true? Were you bullying her? We all shook our heads no.
That's what they all say. These kids might bully my little girl if left alone with her. They don't know what it's like to be disabled and will pick on her because she's different. They always do.
I should probably have felt bad because she made it sound like that's what happens a lot, and I got bullied a lot too at the time. But that kid had done nothing but harass us the entire time. So at the time, I didn't really have much sympathy. As far as I was concerned, she was the bully, and it came off as her trying to get pity points. Security guy lectured her about not watching her kid, and the teacher explained she and her boyfriend grabbed us without consent, and when confronted, pretended they were our parents. Teacher told us to go back to our tents. As we left, she was still going on about how she felt we shouldn't be around because we might stare at her poor disabled little girl and bully her. He seemed very fast to side with us over her. Maybe her kid pulled this on other children too. Don't know. I never found out what happened to her. We never saw her again. Maybe she was arrested? I'd like to think so. Or maybe she was banned from the campsite, or at least the playground. When I remembered, I tried telling my mum, who did not believe me. I've been in some crazy situations where if you are not there, you won't believe it. It's tricky when you're in those situations because when there's somebody who's disabled, you want to be kind and compassionate towards them. But what happens when they're the bully? When they're the one who's not being kind to you? I think as a general principle, you should be kind to everyone, even if they're not kind to you. But at the same time, there is a limit where you need to be able to stand up for yourself, to protect your own welfare or those of your friends or family around you. What would you do if you're in a situation where you just pushed over a disabled person? Like, why did you just push them over? Well, they pushed me first? Even if it's true, it just doesn't look good. This story was called The Story of Me Leaving My Dad. So a little backstory. I lost my sister at the age of 12 to a brain tumor, about half a year of my mum caring for her and even keeping her at home, because it was clear she would die. So why keep her in a hospital? After she died, my mum got in a really bad depression and simply couldn't take care of me. My parents got separated when I was 10 and had to go into rehab, so I had to live with my father for half a year until she was done. My mum was never a really organized and I have it all together person, since she, like me, has ADHD. I was in school and had my problems with remembering stuff like homework or signing exams. My dad was more organized. He's a total workaholic and had his stuff pretty much together. My dad had a strong personality. He's narcissistic, greedy when it comes to money, stubborn, and extremely strong in arguing. I always wondered why he didn't become a lawyer, because he could win pretty much every argument with simple logic and good reasons. I never had a good relationship with him. He was always more like a boss to me than a father figure. He never played outside with me, did dad stuff or anything like that when I was a kid. He always sat on his PC working. So now, fast forward to half a year later, he took care of me, helped me remember stuff, and generally took care of me. Now I had to decide whether I stay or go back to my mum for the official divorce. It broke my heart to do it, but I stayed with him out of pure common sense. After that decision, he left me pretty much on my own, got me to stop taking Ritalin and stop looking out for me. He worked 24/7, gave me a little money every month for clothes, my phone bill and other stuff, which was not even close to enough. I haven't bought a real set of clothes for almost 2 years. We often got into arguments, and in the 3 years I was with him, I learned how to argue with people and pretty much win every argument. This may seem like something good, but believe me, if you do it out of instinct and in topics like love, it's a huge curse and brought me into some pretty bad stuff. Especially because I know a lot of stuff about mental illness and could, without knowing, really abuse someone. I never did to someone physically or mentally so they had to be fixed, but I was in some situations where I really tried helping someone and kept them with me, even though they just needed time and professional help. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. After 2 years with him, I've had enough. I didn't feel like living with my father. I felt like I was living with some guy that was employed to look after me. I told him one day that I wanted to go back to my mum. As the guy he is, he wanted to know the reason, and I just told him that I feel closer to her and was always a mum child. Of course, that wasn't a real reason for him. He wanted to know exactly what was wrong. Out of pure fear and anxiety, I just told him some simple stuff. I even made a list with stuff that I didn't like, which took a lot of energy and braveness to do. He read the list and changed most of the stuff half-hearted. I still wanted to go, but he still was refusing to take my wish seriously about my feeling with her, telling me, "That's not a real reason. Do you think a judge will take that as a reason?" I was persisting on it, and he even began telling me stories about my mum and their marriage, that she cheated on him and stuff like that. What kid wants to hear this? I had to ask my freaking mum about her side of the story because I simply had to know her side too if he's telling me all this stupid crap. So a year later I just went. My mum moved to a different city, and since I was about to start an apprenticeship that was closer to that city, I just said screw it, I'm out of here. So in summer I packed most of my stuff and went back to her telling my dad that it was for a vacation. Before I did that, my mum took care of everything legal and stuff because of the divorce. I got to a judge which listened to me for an hour and noted everything I said and every reason I told him for going back to her. She talked to her lawyer, etc., so everything was taken care of. Back to where I went to her. My dad had a girlfriend for about 2 years, which I really liked and trusted, so I told her that I'm not coming back. Well, she instantly betrayed me, which was not really a good way to leave from there. I'm back with her, I'm happy, and now comes the actual entitled parent part. The whole divorce and law thing started, and so we got 2 letters. The first one was from the judge that summed up what I told him and listed all the reasons why it's totally understandable that I'm going back to her. The list had about 20 points, so everything was fine at that side. The second letter was from my dad's lawyer. In a nutshell, the letter had about 3 pages of stuff written about the child support money and this whole thing. A page about some legal crap, and at the far end was a point where it said, OP's change of custody. Below were about 3 sentences that basically said that I had no clear reason to leave him, and I was just in a mood. So I had a list from the judge with about a page full of reasons from me that were enough for me to leave him. On the other side, 3 sentences telling me that I'm in a mood. I was 15 at this point and way more mature than anyone I knew at my age. That's not even the best part of it. My mum had a trial with that exact judge that listened to me. My father acted like a 3-year-old child that got his toy taken away and basically told the judge that he's completely outraged by this and it was a shady and devious act of me leaving like that, especially because he had no idea that I wanted to go back. He told him one last thing before being interrupted by the judge, which was, I don't want any custody of him. If he wants to come, he should call me and ask me if he can stay. I'm not going to do anything. Then the judge, my hero in this whole thing, answered with, Mr. Whatever, you're a grown man, and the individual we are talking about is your son. He told you a year before this trial that he wants to go back to his mother, which you refused to take seriously. And to add to it, put him under immense pressure of criticizing you just so you took him serious. You've already lost a child. You sure you want to lose a second one? My mum on the other side dropped her jaw. I wasn't there to see it, but I wanted to see his face so badly after he just got that punch in his face. He contacted me a few months after this and we got back together. I have a healthy relationship with him, basically because he has no control over me anymore, and I can tell him anything with having no real backlash, except for him maybe crapping on my mum. He's still convinced that she's a complete mess and isn't good for me, and her just telling him to get lost in a mannered way. I have a little add-on to this. I'm currently 18 years old, so this whole thing ended about 2 years ago. I was on vacation this summer with him and I kinda enjoyed it, even though I still don't feel like I'm his son because I can't do stupid stuff or really have fun with him. Except for the occasional joke or weird person we make fun of. But the worst thing he did on the whole trip was tell me about that time I wanted to go back to her. He told me that he thought I would leave because she influenced me and wanted the money to pay for her new apartment, which she had at the time already, even though she didn't know if I was coming back, so she could afford it. He went on to tell me that he felt betrayed and thought all this was just about money. I tell him on the regular what happens in my life, even stuff about my mum that he could easily use for his own needs, or just simply blackmail or whatever. I even told him about my mental health, etc. But stuff like this just makes my stomach turn. To add on to this, he regularly paid my mum's child support too late. She had to run after it. The month I got 18, he started paying me that, and since then, he never paid it late. If someone has problems with money, it's him. And he does have problems. He makes about 10k a month and somehow still has bills piled up. I don't necessarily intuitively trust the justice system we have, but it is good to know that there are some judges out there that'll listen to the kids' side of the things and what they want out of the situation. It's not an easy situation at all, and it's just heartbreaking all around. And there's never really a clear right or wrong choice either. And it's just really sad to think that the whole time the dad just thought it was just about money. instead of listening to his son and what he actually wanted. This story was called, "You Should Have Just Let Him See Your Dog." So you guys asked me to post more of my stories, and the more I thought about the bad ones, this is the one that came to the top of my list. This is the story of what ultimately made me leave the daycare I was working for in the previous story. My wife and I lived in an apartment for a few years due to us saving for a house. We lived in a cheaper apartment so we could really sock away money to put toward a house we both liked. Well, I was in my last semester of college and I was still working at the daycare I mentioned in my last story. There was a kid that went to the daycare that stayed in my apartment complex. This boy would always show up at our door. So, our cast. Me, just trying to watch Netflix and drink my sweet tea. W, my beautiful wife. K, the kid who can't take a hint. EM, the entitled mother. So the kid showed up periodically to see if I would play with him and his younger siblings. I literally never did because I figured I did it one time and then he would expect it daily. So I started saying no, and then it got to the point where my wife would answer and say I wasn't home. He found out which car was mine. So he stayed away until he saw me walking my new dog, at the time, one day. He asked if he can pet it, and I said yes. Then the unwanted visitations escalated.
Hey mister, let me see your puppy!
Hey buddy, I've had a long day, I gotta go. Maybe some other time. Well, that worked for a while until one Saturday in particular, he comes knocking at my door. I go to answer it, and my dog was in the bedroom with my wife, and they were napping. He asked if he could see the dog and I said no, and that everyone but me was sleeping. This boy rolled his eyes and said,
"No, I'm tired of not being able to see your dog."
He ran into my apartment and straight for the bedroom. He wakes my wife up screaming, saying, "Where's the dog?" I was in shock. This boy had really run up in my apartment. So my wife is trying to cover herself with a blanket. My dog is losing his mind, and the kid is trying to pet the dog. Well, my dog snapped at him. The kid took his shoe off and then threw it at my dog. So at this point I'm realizing what is happening. So I walk over to the kid and pick him up like a baby in a cradle and walk him to the patio. I told him this wasn't okay and that he needs to stay away from my apartment. Well, cue his mum stomping up the stairs. "Oh hell no," is the only thing I hear before this woman comes up and gets directly in my face. She lets me explain nothing. Just keeps screaming how I will not talk to her kid like that, and she's going to tell the daycare and get me fired. When I finally get a chance to talk and explain what happened, this woman looked me dead in the eye and said,
"Why didn't you just let him see the dog? This is so stupid."
She then opens my apartment door and yells for my wife to bring out the stupid dog. Her son ran back in, and this time my wife was ready and she picked him up and put him on the porch. I told her to lock the door, and I stood out on the patio, getting chewed out. My wife then called the police because it was getting out of hand. While I was trying to get this lady off my patio and take her child with her, the cops showed up.
"He wouldn't let my kid see his dog. He had to do something to see the dog, so he ran in."
I told the officer I didn't want to press charges because it really didn't make sense to mess up a kid like that because he was being dumb. He was probably 8 if I remember correctly, and that was too much. Well, the mum called the daycare right after and pitched a fit, and I got called into a meeting with her and the kid. The mum fabricated this whole story, how I said I was going to show him my dog and that I was breaking the promise, and the kid got upset. When I got asked about my side, I just looked at the kid. "Did I ever promise you that?" "No." The mum got so mad at the kid. She then claimed she had emotional trauma from the situation and asked for a free month of tuition. She didn't get it. After that day, I told my boss that I'm putting in my 2 weeks notice and he would need to start training my assistant manager to take over. Maybe it sounds dumb, but I find the idea of a small child just running into your house a little bit terrifying. I think I'd have the same reaction. I'd just be in shock. It's like, well, what do I do? It's like, I don't want to physically remove this kid, but at the same time, he's not just gonna leave. Then how do you explain to the mom? Like, of course the mom's gonna freak out. She's gonna be like, what's going on? The problem is she didn't let the guy explain. She just believed the kid straight away. It's just not the kind of situation you want to be in. Not only should he have resigned, he should have moved far away. Just get the house now. Post your stories, memes, and fan art at r/VoiceyHere. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode. Alright, Voicey veterans, I'll see you in the next one.